Hello, everybody. This is Gerald Salenti, and it's Wednesday, June 7th, 2023. And once again, on these Wednesdays, we're so honored to have with us a man of men, someone who really knows the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and fights for the freedom of the American people and the people around the world that have lost their freedom. And, Judge, thanks for being here today, because your new article is that state secrets undermine due process. We're talking about freedom, no freedom of speech, and no Constitution. And it seems like week after week when we meet, it's always another level of how we become not the United States of America, but the USSA, the United Soviet States of America. And your article here, that state secrets undermine due process, really exemplifies that.
Well, it's hard to believe, and Gerald, always a pleasure to be on with you, my dear friend. It's hard to believe that in a courtroom of the United States of America, the prosecutor has a buzzer on his table, and if he suspects that the defense lawyer is going to say something that's a secret, he gets to press the buzzer, silence his adversary, the public can't hear what's going on, and the judge admonishes defense counsel not to say what he was about to say. Now, this is a procedure that was used in the old Soviet Union when the Soviets wanted to frustrate a criminal defense lawyer, but this is happening. Now, it's Guantanamo Bay, but it's a federal courtroom under federal law with a federal judge, with a federal prosecutor, with a military defense counsel being stifled. And what was the military defense counsel talking about? Where and how my client was tortured and why he was locked up for 20 years before they even brought charges against him. And this is what he was prevented and stifled from saying. My point is not that the defendant is a good person, but that if this can happen in an American courtroom to this guy, we should all know about it and be aware of it, because it is just one more baby step of the government crushing liberty, the liberty of the press to know what's going on, the First Amendment, the liberty of the defendant to have due process rights, a fair proceeding against him, and the liberty of the defendant to have his Sixth Amendment rights, which is effective assistance of counsel. If the prosecutor can silence the defense lawyer, then the defendant does not have effective assistance of counsel, and that right has been violated. Does the government care? No. Under what procedure is this happening? The Lindsey Graham, George Bush military tribunal procedure that they wrote and rewrote 5 times from 2001 to 2006, still going on in Gitmo.
You know, 2 things. The guy that they're prosecuting in that's been locked up for over 20 years in Guantanamo Bay, some 20 years, he's allegedly, blew up a hotel or something in Indonesia?
Correct.
What the hell do we care what happened in Indonesia?
Exactly. And they had no evidence against him until they tortured him for 4 years. So the issue is they can't use the evidence against him. Even these rules, thanks to the Supreme Court, prohibit using evidence obtained under torture. So what are we doing here, Your Honor? That is basically the argument. So the government, because there's 3 of them, goes to the weakest link of the 3 and says, we'll give you a good deal if you testify against the other 2. The third tells the government to go take a hike. So now they don't know what to do. So what do? They silence defense counsel when he talks about it. You and I are revealing more to the public, people watching us now, about this than defense counsel was permitted to reveal in this courtroom. So in the courtroom, there's a glass wall. The press is on the other side of the glass wall from the judge and the defendant and the prosecutor and defense counsel. And the PA system has a 40 second delay. So when the buzzer goes off, obviously the press doesn't get to hear what happened. The press doesn't get to hear anything because the government is terrified of making an admission that it tortured people.
I have one of those buzzers, by the way. You ready? Here it is.
Bullshit. Bullshit. That is bullshit. Bullshit.
That's the government. Bullshit. You're right here. You mentioned about how the state secret thing became an issue when a plane crashed in the 1940s, and the people wanted to know what, the manufacturer of the plane that killed the people. And they said they wouldn't reveal it because they said it was a state secret.
Turned out there was no secret at all. All the feds wanted to do was to protect, here we go, Dwight D. Eisenhower warned us, to protect the military contractor from being sued. Everybody on the plane was a male. They all died. So these are our wives and mothers wanted to sue the manufacturer of the plane for the plane crash, and the government wouldn't tell them who the manufacturer was. 30 years later, when everybody involved in the case was dead, actually 50 years later, the New York Times, sometimes they do good things, filed a Freedom of Information Act request to find out what the state secrets were that couldn't be revealed. There were none.
There were none.
What they wanted to protect was government embarrassment and the identification of the government contractor, and it was too late to sue him.
Yeah. This is terrible what's going on. The American way, crushing liberty. I think that's what's happened. And they've crushed it in every different way. And it's just getting worse and worse by the day. The damage, by the way, that this COVID war has done is incalculable.
Yes.
Not only economically, but mentally, spiritually, physically, all the data is there. Crime rates skyrocketing. I mean, there was never this thing where, stores closing down because of high crime rates before this happened. Now you're seeing the drug overdose numbers, the suicide rates, the obesity rates, on and on. Now another study came out because they had masks on. Little kids, now the kids are having trouble talking as they're growing up because they weren't able to speak freely as kids. I mean, it's the damage that's been done. But I'm mentioning this because, again, our liberty and freedom was robbed from us from politicians who made up laws based on political science, not real science.
Well, they made up their own rules. No legislature, not the New York legislature, not the New Jersey legislature, not the U.S. Congress, no legislature ordered any lockdown whatsoever. These were all diktats ordered by, to some extent, Trump, but for the most part by the governors of the states. And we all, not you and I, but 90% of the public caved like a nation of sheep. Yep. And now that, as you pointed out, is bearing fruit. It has resulted in lack of mature intellectual, cultural development on the part of children. And for some reason, the crime rate has spiked. You go to a drugstore in New York City, go to a Walgreens or something like that, and try and buy a toothbrush. You can't grab the toothbrush. Everything in that drugstore is behind a plate glass. You got to get the clerk to come and open up the door so you can see which toothbrush you want. It's the same for anything: toothbrush, toothpaste, soap, whatever you're going to buy there, because for some reason, the shoplifting is rampant in New York post-COVID.
Well, it's all over. It's going again. As I said, when it happened, when people lose everything and have nothing left to lose, they lose it, and they've lost it. Judge, on another level of atrocities, a couple of days ago, a dam and hydroelectric plant was blown up in Ukraine. And these are the headlines from Associated Press. Ukraine accuses Russia of destroying major dam near Kherson, warns of ecological disaster. CNN. Destruction of critical dam is ecocide. Zelensky aide says, New York Times, Ukraine blamed Russia for destroying the barrier, critical dam destroyed on front line in southern Ukraine. They all blame Russia. Every headline in America blames Russia. This is a headline from TASS. I don't know how to pronounce this properly. You could tell me if I'm in the right way. Kakhovka, HPP continues to collapse. Water is discharged uncontrollably. Ukraine forces shelled the Kakhovka HPP in the early morning hours on Tuesday. Ukrainian forces, that's TASS, the Russian news agency, saying. Sputnik, power plant destruction deliberate sabotage by Ukraine. Kremlin. So Russia says one thing, and America only says another thing. You're not allowed, if Zelensky's said that Russia did it, then Russia did it. Why would they blow up their own plant that they had troops there, Russian troops, that also is a very important canal going into Crimea, which Russia now controls? Why would they destroy what they own?
Well, they wouldn't. The question is, who benefits by the destruction of this? The Ukraine people benefit by the destruction of it because it floods out the area that the Russians controlled. And one of the Ukraine generals, I just saw this morning, back in 22, said we may have to destroy this dam in order to prevent the Russians from getting too close to it. Colonel McGregor was of the view that he thought it was a defect in the dam. I think it was a defect in Zelensky's thinking that resulted in the dam being destroyed. But to your point, the American public is continually browbeat to hate all things Russian, to suspect all things Russian, to condemn all things Russian and all things Putin, which is why, like everything else in this war, from the destruction of the Nord Stream pipeline now to the destruction of this dam, the American, there it is, who blew up the Nord Stream pipelines. We will bring an end to it, I promise you. Another thing he doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. The American media speaks with one voice.
One voice. Again, that whole thing with Tucker Carlson, whether you like him, hate him, not the issue. One guy not speaking the same voice as 99.9999999%, you're out of here. We don't want you.
Right.
Again, that was it. That was the big news.
Right.
Yep. That was all of the news. One guy, again, that's the American media. And by the way, that's why people subscribe to the Trends Journal, because we don't take sides on things. We give you what they're reporting and then making it clear this is our trend analysis and our trend forecast. And staying with this, the U.S. government has intelligence that is leaning toward Russia as the culprit behind the destruction of Ukraine's dam and hydroelectric power plant in the early hours of June 6th, according to a report by NBC. Well, hey, if NBC said it, then it must be true.
So where did NBC get the data to put in their report? From the CIA.
Yeah.
Where did the CIA get their data? From their visceral hatred of all things Russian. I mean, it's a farce that people would believe this. There you go. It's a farce. But by the way, Gerald, these covers are unbelievably good.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, that's what it is. So now Russia's response. The sabotage has the potential to cause very serious consequences for tens of thousands of the region's residents, environmental consequences, and consequences of another nature. The Kremlin spokesman also called it unmistakable that one of the goals of this act of sabotage was to deprive Crimea of water. Quote, the water level in the reservoir is dropping, hence the water supply to the North Crimean Canal is dramatically reduced. Apparently, the sabotage is also due to the fact that, having launched large-scale offensive operations 2 days ago, Ukrainian armed forces have been unable to achieve their aims. The operations are stalled, the spokesman said.
Wow. So NBC and company would have us believe that the Russians are trying to take water away from Crimea, which has been part of Russia since 1730.
Yeah.
And the American public will accept that. The American public is generally not well schooled on geography or geology, and they'll accept what the media says, particularly when it's a drumbeat, when all the media is saying effectively the same thing.
So
I guess to the Ukrainians, this is the opening blow of their so-called spring offensive. McGregor argues that they are totally unprepared for a spring offensive, but they've been promising it to the West for so long that they're probably going to have some false fits and starts, and this may be one of them.
Well, again, as I see it, this is a continuing escalation, and there's going to be a major false flag event that happens that's going to get the people to keep supporting this bloody war, and it's going to continue to escalate.
Yes.
As I say, when all else fails, they take you to war. And there it is. And,
Right.
and we're looking now at the economies around the world the World Bank came out just yesterday with negative news about GDP growth across the globe. And so, again, you go back to what followed the Great Depression, World War II, what followed the dot-com bust, the war on terror. And I believe that, again, as you said, the people only read the headlines. They don't know the data, and the headlines are all propaganda headlines. So when they're ready to go to war against Russia, the people will swallow it.
The danger with a protracted war like this is a couple of dangers here. As recently as 6 days ago, Secretary of State Blinken, speaking in Helsinki, reiterated the American nonsense that Putin is losing, Putin's going to lose, and we're in this war. We're there to back the Ukrainians for as long as it takes.
Yep.
They have no exit ramp. They have no way out of it. What does a protracted war mean? It eventually, look at history, it eventually leads to escalation, to heavier military equipment and the involvement of more people. When Viktor Orban, the president or the prime minister of Hungary, which is a member of NATO, was asked, why are you opposed to this? And he said, well, my heart goes out for the Ukrainian people, but this is not a war that they can win. This war should end immediately.
Yep.
And I'm not going to lift a finger to extend the war. I don't want Russian boys to die any more than I want Ukrainian boys to die. The questioner says, what about NATO, Orban? Look at the facts. NATO's heart is not in this. If it were, you'd see NATO troops on the ground, and you don't.
Wow. And again, what the hell are we doing in NATO? That's none of our business. That was
Agreed.
the thing should have been gone a long time ago.
We've only had one president in the post-World War II era oppose us being involved in NATO, and I wish he had carried through on his threat to leave, and that's Trump. Listen, I disagree with a lot of things about Trump, but on this, I profoundly agree with him. I also profoundly agree with him that we don't belong sending military equipment to Ukraine.
Oh, yeah. Again, we wrote about this going back over a decade ago in the Trends Journal, No Need for NATO. You know, we've been writing about this. And again, what what Orban said about not being involved in this and to stop it because of the bloodshed, the numbers are coming out that half of the Ukrainian population is gone out of the country. I mean, they're escaping like crazy. Could you imagine every day waking up and not knowing whether or not there's a bomb's going to drop on you?
Right. Where are they going? They're going to Poland. They're going to Romania. They're trying to go to Hungary. He's doing his best to keep a lid on things. I wish more of these European leaders thought about war the way he did. And the interviewer said, I don't know how old Orban is, but the interviewer said, you saw pictures as a boy in 1956 of Soviet tanks in Budapest. And he said, yes, I did. That was the Soviet Union. This is Russia. Russia is a prosperous trading partner. This is not the Soviet Union of old. The American foreign policy establishment needs to recognize that.
Yeah, this is really, again, what no one is also talking about is how this has destroyed Ukraine's economy.
Yeah.
Can you imagine?
Gerald,
It's
guess
gone.
who's going to rebuild it?
Yeah.
The American taxpayer.
Yep.
Not the present generation of American taxpayers, because they don't have the cash. They'll borrow the money, and the great grandchildren of Gen X, human beings as yet unborn, 50% of their tax revenue will be going to pay interest on debt incurred today. You probably know this better than I, what Janet Yellen has borrowed since Biden signed the debt bill, or what her goal to borrow in 1 week, $1 trillion. You know what that's going to do to interest rates? She's going to borrow $1 trillion in 1 week. She's going to have to offer huge interest rates to get that kind of cash.
Yeah. There's your cover of the Current Trends Journal.
There it is.
Just more babble. Yep. Now, this is a clown show. Look at the people you mentioned. Earlier you mentioned Lindsey Graham. How can anybody quote that little jerk, arrogant boy? There's not a war he didn't love. Look at this little clown of nothing. And he's quoted all the time like he's some brilliant, And then the other one you mentioned, Blinken, a little daddy's boy. An arrogant, I went to Dalton. I went to Harvard. Don't you know who my daddy was? Every damn war that little boy loved. And these guys couldn't fight their way out of a paper bag. Anybody that supports war, put on your costume, go over there and go fight. Send your money, send your wife, your kids, your partners, or whatever. Go there or shut your mouth. That's the way I see it. You support it, you go there. You support it, you go there, or shut your mouth.
Well, these are big government guys who want to tell the rest of us how to live. I mean, Lindsey Graham said to Lindsey Graham said
the article you wrote. They're telling us how to live, how to think, what we can do. Our freedom has been stolen from us.
Oh, and they're also telling us what we can't say.
That's right. I forgot. I fuck out. Here, remember. Here we are.
Gerald, your audiences love you.
And this is from my cousin Liz. That's her idea, the back of the shirt.
Yeah.
Yep. I mean, who are these little clowns to tell us what to do?
Well, if Lindsey Graham said directly to President Zelensky, killing Russians is the best money we ever spent.
Yep. Best money we ever spent. The best money is stole from we the people who work like crazy, and you're robbing us of not only of our money, but of our morality.
Yes.
And morality
they have no sense of the Blinken, Biden, Lindsey Graham, even going back to George W. They have no sense of morality.
None.
They don't believe in natural rights. They don't believe in right and wrong. They just believe in power.
Yep.
Phil Giraldi, whom you and I know well, is going to be on Judging Freedom with me, I think at 3:00 this afternoon. Phil,
folks, Judging Freedom. Make sure you go there. And Giraldi's, what a man he is, a real man of honor, a former CIA top guy that went into George Bush's office with the facts that there were no weapons of mass destruction. And Bush told him to leave the office, and Giraldi quit the CIA.
And then Bush went out and had Colin Powell address the UN, effectively the world. We all watched the speech.
I remember it
lying
well.
through his teeth, something he would eventually admit before he died, but the damage was done.
You're holding up a little piece of colon crap.
Yeah.
Remember that? A little vial of nothing. This was
Right.
proof. And the
Right.
people swallowed it.
Right. Right.
Yeah. Thanks a
So
lot.
again, it's not to this mentality, and it's in both political parties. It's the big government party, it's the national security state party, it's the state secrets party, it's the welfare state party. There is no right or wrong. It's just power.
That's it. They're power freaks in charge. Hey, Eisenhower said it. Any man who seeks the office of president is either crazy or an egomaniac. And most of them fit that.
Yes.
Not all of them, but most of them.
Yes.
Thanks
Yes.
so much, Judge. See you next
Pleasure,
week. And
Gerald.
don't forget, everyone, Judging Freedom. You got to watch the judge, what he's doing, the people he has on. Nothing like it. Thanks so much, Judge.
Thank you, Gerald. All the best.